Thank you again for joining us on the Designated Pundits. We're doing our 2026 season preview by previewing all 30 Major League Soccer teams. Tonight we're here to discuss FC Cincinnati. 9 teams in, and I finally landed an introduction without stumbling on my words. That's cause enough to celebrate. Thank you, Scott. Today we're here with Coach Gough from Cincy Soccer Talks. Another member of the Shiny Camera Club here. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Let us know where we can find all the Cincy Soccer Talk stuff.
Yeah, everywhere on all the socials at Cincy Soccer Talk is where you do it. We do a Monday night live show. We also release it as a podcast, but YouTube, all of that. But yeah, Cincy Soccer Talk or CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com.
Thank you. And thank you guys for watching. Make sure you drop a comment, get in the chat section. We will pull up any comments, any relevant questions as they come up. And now we are on Spotify with video. And if you're on YouTube, make sure we're monetized now. You probably just watch a 10-second ad. You're probably 10 seconds behind. Always click the catch up to live, and you can catch up to us wherever we are in the episode. Thank you for that. Now, let's get right down to business, Scott. FC Cincinnati, there's the guy, Evander. That's our cover artwork there. And that's how they lived and died through 2025. 20 wins, 5 draws, 9 losses. Second place in the Eastern Conference behind Inter Miami. They lost 4-0 to Inter Miami in the conference semis and were eliminated in the round of 16 in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So, successful season from a standing standpoint, but maybe not from a trophy standpoint.
Coach, I want to ask about that because Cincy, I think for us, was a team that we watched at the beginning of the year and through most of the season and thought this is a trophy contender team, and especially with the way that Evander landed in Cincy and did really, really well. I thought, hey, yeah, this team for sure should be a trophy contender. Do you feel any sense of disappointment or failure that the team didn't win a trophy?
Yeah, I think even beyond that, Scott, it's not just that they didn't win a trophy. It's even finishing second in the Supporter Shield standings like they did. The season never felt good to FC Cincinnati fans. The team never really clicked. When they were winning, they were scraping by 1 goal. They were roaring out to 3-0 leads in Portland and then letting teams catch up and winning 3-2. So I don't think anybody in Cincinnati looks back on last season and just thinks oh, that was a good, relaxing season and no big deal that we didn't win anything.
I agree. I think that FC Cincinnati was not particularly special at anything last year, and that's a change. FC Cincinnati's kind of been special at something for a long time, and I remember saying a lot at the beginning of the season, guys, this team, they played a fantastic season, but to your point, they were incredibly difficult to bet on. That's what I'm the most interested in. Particular results, a 0-0 draw at Inter Miami. No one can find a goal, and you're playing Inter Miami? How does that work? And then really, really close by, they had 3 1-0 home losses to Philadelphia, New York City, and Charlotte. And that was the point where I just said, okay, I'm gonna pack it up. I'm not gonna bet on this team anymore. I don't know what they're doing. Hopefully it gets a little better in 2026. But let's talk about how they got to where they are. 52 goals scored, was 8th in the East. Average. 40 goals against, 2nd in the East. Was not expecting that. And a plus 12 goal differential, was tied for 5th in the East. So, you had a lot of good things going here. But to some people's surprise, it was the defense that kept you in second place and the offense who looked a little lackluster at times.
Yeah, when you look at a team that has, the high price tag of a Kevin Denke coming in to lead the line and then Evander sitting behind him, people were excited here. They thought this offense was going to be great. And coming off of a season in 24 where the defense was pretty good, it felt like it could be the total package. But the offense never really got out of second gear. You talk about those goals, only being, 8th in the East. And if you look at the actual expected goals, it's even worse than that. They would have finished 11th in the East based on expected points, because you said they weren't special at anything. The one thing they were special at is scoring on low XG chances. You had Evander banging in, 35-yard shots, but that is not something you can rely on. And that's why nothing ever felt stable and good.
I'd argue that is something you can rely on. The thing that I have with XG is, general teams kind of regress towards the mean if they're outside of that mean, but there's a reason that Inter Miami is above everyone in XG all the time. Lionel Messi does not care what average players do in an average position. So, XG, I kind of always see it as kind of two sides to the same coin. You could say, hey, they were unlucky. I don't really believe in luck. Or you could say, hey, they're performing better than they should, and that's because they have better players in certain spots. So, which side are you on the XG? Do you really favor it? Like if you're setting up a betting model, because I have mine, and I use more real goals than XG numbers because I feel like that's just a better, more valuable stat for me.
I do have a betting model actually, and what I use is non-penalty expected goals. So I take out all penalty kicks, and then I actually compare them against the normal non-penalty XG that teams allow. So if you're playing an FC Cincinnati or you're playing against a Miami, those teams you expect to have more or less expected goals when you're playing teams that don't play defense. So I actually compare the real numbers to what they are, and that's how I use it. I think it's a good metric, but it's not the be-all end-all. You mentioned it being difficult to bet on FC Cincinnati. Case in point, FC Cincinnati was on the losing end of that XG model all year, and yet they finished second in the Supporter Shield. They won quite a few games, so it definitely, goals are what win games, not expected goals or spreadsheets.
And
I want to bring up one thing, which is the defensive aspect to this. 40 goals against, second in the East. It sounds like your defense was fabulous all year, but that's not how I remember it. And I pulled up a quick stat because I was like, why? I thought this team actually regressed on defense, was not nearly as good as they were previously. Well, Celentano had 11 clean sheets, and Loro had 1. So you either shut the teams out or you conceded 2 goals.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, the FC Cincinnati fans would not tell you that their blood pressures were at staple levels last year. This is what you're talking about. So many times, 1 goal became 2. You draw 0-0 away at Inter Miami, and you think you held Inter Miami in their own home off of the score sheet, and then you go and you get tonked 4-2 at Atlanta. Atlanta, who was terrible all year. So things like that. And I think that the big differentiator there when you talk about XG is teams were getting high XG chances against FC Cincinnati. And when Celentano was able to stand on his head and keep them out of the net and earn a clean sheet, they could win. So I would agree with you. The defense, the numbers, the raw numbers look good. But when you look under those numbers, it was not a comfortable year. And I think a lot of that had to do with constant changing personnel.
Yeah, and you talk about constant change personnel. Miles Robinson, Matt Miazga have been injured over the past 2 seasons. I was very surprised to find. I thought I was going to look at the numbers and break down, the team's getting more goals when Matt Miazga isn't on the field. It wasn't. It was actually Nick Hagland's availability, which dictated everything on defense for FC Cincinnati, which I had to look at my numbers 6 times. I'm like, this can't be. We're going to talk about that again when we get to the depth chart because, surprise, not a projected starter for 2025. That might be a mistake. Some other storylines for FC Cincinnati we're going to go over quickly. They swapped number 10s before the season started. Lucho Acosta out. He went to FC Dallas, and Evander in. We always knew that was going to be fantastic because Evander is such a great player. You also signed Ender in July. Brought Brenner back on what turned out to be a very short loan. And just for argument's sake, when I talk about the team, the breakdown, what they had very similar home and away records. It wasn't that they were unbeatable at home. I think they were 11-3-6, 11-2-5 on the road. So a team that played equally as well at home and away.
9-3-5 at home. If I can throw a little correction in there. 9-3.
Oh, I'm counting the playoffs too, so I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. But it was only good enough for 8th in the East in terms of home record. And that was a surprise to me.
I think it was a surprise to everyone. Certainly the crowd at TQL, you mentioned off the top of the show, those home losses to NYCFC and Charlotte. Those were games where those teams did not come to play soccer. They came to TQL to sit in a bunker and then throw a late punch. And that late punch just happened to land on a glass jaw and knock FC Cincinnati out because, it seemed like all season the team could not get comfortable at TQL. And I think a lot of that when you're struggling offensively to really click and you're playing at home and teams want to see you attack and score and the pressure starts to mount. So I think probably the home environment that can be such a boon and such a good thing for the team kind of also provided a little extra pressure for some guys that were trying to settle in.
Yeah, and we know Wilfred Nancy found that out in the playoffs when he won on aggregate by a lot and did not win the 3-game series there. Just briefly running over the goal scores, it's exactly how we would have thought. Evander, 18 goals, 14 assists. Kevin Denke, 15 goals and 1 assist. And then a couple of role players, Valenzuela with 5, Brenner with 4, Pavel Buka with 3, and Luca Oriano with 2 goals and 5 assists. If you're watching on YouTube, you can pull these stats up and play along with us here. Any surprises here?
The big size surprise for FC Cincinnati fans, I think, was Luca Oriano, or Oriano, depending how you want to say it. Only 2 goals coming off a season where I think in 24 it was double digits. He really disappointed. He held out to begin the year because he wanted more money. He got more money, and then he came in and just never really settled. He was injured a little bit in and out because he didn't start the season fit, and so he didn't hit the ground running. To begin the season, people were calling the big 3 because FC Cincinnati did the 2 DP for U22. So our big 3 was Evander, Kevin Denke, and Luca. And Luca, you can see on the graphic there, was not big, and that was a surprise.
I think the surprise to me too is the severe drop off in production, right? Evander, 18 goals, Denke, 15 goals. The next best player is Valenzuela with 5. Like, as we talk about like inability to seal the deal in, big games or at home, or, and you mentioned this team, the attack didn't quite get there. I don't know. This is starting to like tell a story to me that it's like, well, if Evander can't do it, if Denke can't do it, if teams are wise to the fact that it's those 2 guys that are going to do it, that Cincy lacked another option.
Yeah, and even worse than that, it's not even just these 2 guys like running the ship together. It was literally one or the other. I think that all season, Evander assisted on like maybe 2 of Kevin Denke's goals or something ridiculous like that. For him scoring 15 and for Evander having 14 assists. It was just a ridiculous inability of those 2 to connect. So not only was it really top heavy, it wasn't a 2-headed monster top heavy. It was, whichever 1-headed monster happened to show up that game.
Well, and I think Luca Oriano's like 5 assists is literally the second best on the team, which is a wild kind of thing to not have any other creativity outside of Evander.
Yeah, that came from Alvaro Barreal in the Supporters Shield winning season, and the lack of a secondary chance creator caused this team to play extremely narrow because everything had to run through Evander. It was even worse than the Lucho Acosta days where it felt like everything ran through Lucho because you had Alvaro Barreal chipping in with 10 or 12 assists as well. Like that secondary chance creation was huge, and FC Cincinnati just didn't have it this year.
It's very Nashvilleian, a little bit there. Let's look at some of the incoming and outgoing players. Let's turn the page on 2025. Look ahead. Players outgoing. Brenner, his loan expired. You have Lucas Engel, Kai Kamara, Yuya Kubo, Dominic Marchuk, Alvaro Barreal, and Luca Oriano, all outgoing players. There's a few here that, are names, but overall, I think at this point in the season, before February 1st, most of the big name players are replaced.
Yeah, I think so. And, 4 of those players were loans. Brenner, Lucas Engel, Mark Zook, and Alvaro Barreal. And Alvaro Barreal was not even on the team. He was a loan in the opposite direction. He was on loan last season. So he's not going to be missed because he wasn't around. But yeah, in fact, I would say this might be the best offseason in the Pat Noonan era in terms of stability and not having so much changeover. You see a big list of players out, but like you said, they're already replaced or their replacement was already on the roster last year.
even still, is there anybody you think they're going to miss? Anybody maybe as a fan that you're like, I wish that guy was still around?
For me, it's Yuya Kubo because he was kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. So a lot of fans didn't love him because he was never great at anything, but he was a guy who played every position on the pitch other than goalkeeper and center back, literally left wing back, right wing back, forward, mid, everything. So having a guy like that, and he's been around since the Jaap Stam era, the wooden spoon era. So that's a guy that I'm going to miss. I think a lot of fans will miss Brenner because even though he was only around for like 7 games plus the postseason, he scored some huge goals, helped us eliminate Columbus. So that is a name that people were really excited that he came back. And so that I think people are hurting that FC Cincinnati couldn't find a way to keep him around.
From an outsider perspective, Yuya Kubo was a guy that when Cincy would start him and when he would have runs of games and stuff, we would kind of call that out. And a lot of times we would say, oh, that's a like an unreliable piece or not a high performing piece for Cincy. And I can't tell you how many times he went and just proved us wrong in those moments. So like, I love those kind of, Swiss Army knife players, those guys who just come out and grind for the team.
Your Diego Fagundes, if you will.
Yeah, like cult heroes that aren't the stars, but like seem to always find a way to get something done.
Yeah. Speaking of cult heroes, I know why you're so excited. You had this big gulf in XG numbers. It's fixed now because you have Tom Barlow on your team. If you want to get some negative XG numbers, put Tom Barlow on the field. The least impact player, ideal number of minutes, 0 next season. But you do have a new striker on this list. You brought in Ayub Jabari, Felix Sampson, Kyle Smith, MLS veteran Tom Barlow, Brian Ramirez, Christian Fletcher. So there was a little bit of player addition in the free agency this season. Ayub Jabari, obviously notable for, as a projected starting striker for one of the powerful offenses in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, and he came in that summer window last season. So we've seen him on the pitch in orange and blue already. And the thing that's exciting about him is just his measurables. He's like 6'3" and one of the fastest players on the pitch. He is a guy that as a coach, your eyebrows just raise and you're like, if he can ever put it together, he could be outstanding because he's big, he's fast, he can jump. I mean, he looks like an NBA player out there. But he's young and he's 25, so he's not that young, but he's young in terms of soccer experience. And he's never had a season where he's scored more than like 5 professional goals. So will he put it together? Who knows? Maybe MLS is the right spot for him.
Absolutely. So let's take a look now at the depth chart. Now we're projecting this to be a 3-man back line, a 3-4-1-2 kind of formation here. We know, let's start with the wing backs. Brian Ramirez and Ender are our projected starter. You do have some depth now. You picked up Kyle Smith, Alvis Powell. Let's talk about what those positions are responsible for on the field, because I feel like that's going to unlock the rest of the picture here.
Yeah, it really needs to. In 2025, that was one of the big problems in my estimation with the offense is the wingbacks were not very successful at creating chances or creating even just dangerous width. Even if you're not having the assist or the key pass, to be able to advance the ball up the wings and make teams respect that. So often FC Cincinnati would get the ball like deep on the left with Lucas Angle, and he would just shank across into the stands. Those players in a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-1-2, whatever you want to call it, the wingbacks have to be dangerous players, or else the game becomes way too narrow. Teams are able to sit inside, that narrow box inside the 18, the lines of the 18 as they connect. And then you end up taking shots from distance, which is what FC Cincinnati did. I think the hope this year is Ender Echenike in his limited exposure and with his speed, we've seen that he can do it. And then Brian Ramirez comes pretty highly touted. The hope is that the ball can get deep in those into those cutback zones on the wings through those players, and they can play balls into a Kevin Danke and Ayub Jabari, or even cut it back for like an Evander or a Buka arriving late, and start to create those touches inside the box that are coming from goal line passes.
Awesome. Love that. Along with them, let's talk about that like back three defensive unit, and then work our way forward. Tell us how that works. Why 3, not 4? Is this kind of a Pat Noonan special?
Yeah, it's actually not. When he arrived at FC Cincinnati, everybody thought that he would play that 4-4-2 diamond that Philadelphia plays, since that's where he came from. But FC Cincinnati lost 5-0 to Austin in his first match in charge. He went to 3 at the back and never looked back. And I really think it's a personnel sort of thing. You know, if you look at those 3 center backs that are projected starters, the only one that I would trust to play in a back 4 with only one center back partner is Miles Robinson. Matt Miazga, at this stage of his career, he's too slow. Teenage Hadeb is too, erratic. Not good. Yeah, maybe, Nick Hagland has never been good when he's been asked to play in a 2-back, just trying to read that much space, but he's been quite good. In a back 3, those outside center backs have license to get into the midfield and attack the ball. They can go hunting for, goal kicks, things in the air, going to win that, trying to track forwards into the midfield, because when they step into the midfield, the other 2 center backs either slide together or slide left or right, and then it becomes a back 4. So those players have a little bit of license to get out of position. Whereas when you're playing in a back 4 with only 2 center backs, your center backs have to be spot on exactly when they step, exactly when they drop, or else balls get played in behind way too easily.
Let's talk about the midfielders upfield here. We have Pavel Buka and Obina Nudobo. You got Brian Onunga on the depth chart there too. Can you just talk briefly about what the responsibilities are going to be? Is this like a 6-6 or 2-8? How are you seeing the midfield?
Yeah, the way Pat Noonan wants to play is with a more of a traditional 4-3-3 midfield, in that you'll have a 6 and an 8. So an Obina Wobodo, a Brian Onunga, they would be a 6. They would sit in front of that back 4 and protect. And then you have a Pavel Buka, maybe a Sammy Guidi, advance when FCC have the ball, drop back when they don't. So like a box-to-box 8, and then of course Evander as the 10. So that triangle can rotate a little bit. Sometimes Obi will get forward and Buka will have to drop. But in most situations, you're going to want that shuttle, that box-to-box player, that player sitting in front of the back 4, and then the attacking midfielder.
Love it. And then the attacking trident, you got Evander as the 10 and Dinky and Ayub Jabari up top. Do we need to touch on anything else? They're going to score a lot of goals.
Man, I sure hope so. I think that the way that the team is talking, and I think with Ramirez and Echenike, I would look for Kevin Denke to have a lot more one-touch goals. The ones that are fired across the box and he's just steering it in, headers, things like that. And I would look to see Evander even out those goals and assist numbers, maybe come back to earth a little bit with goals, and maybe get more secondary assists by playing in Ender or Brian on the left, and then picking up kind of that MLS secondary assist.
Love it.
Scott,
you have anything for you?
Yeah, we should touch on the goalie, I guess. We kind of skipped over Celentano coming back, and Evan Laurel behind him. Do you have anything else to say about? I mean, honestly, I think Celentano well known amongst the league for being a really good goalie.
Yeah, I think he's a respected shot stopper, and he struggles to command his box. So I think the scouting report on him is, on set pieces, put the ball in on top of him and make him be aggressive and go claim it, and get clear looks at goal, because most of the things that are low XG chances he's going to keep out because he's a good shot stopper.
Love it. And Evan Laurel behind him is one of few Major League Soccer players that I can say I've actually drank an entire beer with. In his Red Bull days, he when he was quite young, it must have been 2021, we would do our supporters club. We would do once a year like a FIFA tournament fundraiser kind of charity drive kind of thing. And he showed up as they're like, there's a guest player coming, like, oh, this is great. Who is it? Who's this guy? I don't know who he is. And I ended up just kind of hanging out with him. Really nice guy. So, wish him the best there. Not too good, though, kind of on Cincinnati.
Yeah, I hear you. He did well for Celentano when Celentano was injured this past season. So, people around here like him. He seems like a guy with a lot of energy and does well in the community. So,
and he had a clean sheet.
Let's move on now and talk about some questions. We can go a little bit more in depth on these. But these are for an article. You guys can head over to hooligansoccer.com, hooligan-soccer.com, and check out my article I'm writing. I need to put my content on their website, so I'm turning these episodes into a little article, and at the very end, I'm including a little Q&A section. So these are going to be standard questions for each and every team. First one, which player outside of our projected starting 11 has the best chance at winning a starting job?
So I think the fan favorite for that answer is Dado Valenzuela. He showed some sauce last year. He had 5 goals, some ability to get into some good spots. The problem is his real true position is 10, which puts him behind Evander. So my pick for this is actually going to be Samuel Guidi. I think this kid has huge upside. He looks like he's quality on the ball. He can also really cover a lot of ground. He looks like a mashup of Obi Wobodo and Pavel Buka, the ability to advance the ball, but also to play in that 6th position. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he ended up starting most games, maybe not as like a Obi replacement or a Buka, but kind of rotating those two out, and Guidi just stays on the pitch.
Interesting. All right. Tell us about like your realistic expectations for this team. What do they accomplish? Is it Supporter Shield? Is it any trophy next year? Like realistic?
Yeah. Honestly, when you look at the state of MLS, I can't imagine any team outside of when you preview Miami, they could say that they realistically expect a Supporter Shield. There's just too many players that are taking huge discounts to go to Miami. So I'm not making any comment, whatever. It is what it is. The point is Miami has a stacked team. So to expect a Supporter Shield, I think is silly. But I think it would be realistic to expect them that they could finish 2nd. I don't think that that's outside. I'm not saying that's where I wouldn't necessarily pick them, but they're coming into an offseason for once with stability. They have a lot of top end talent: Evander, Kevin Denke, Brian Ramirez, Obi Wobodo, guys, previous best 11s or even defenders of the year. If Matt Miazga gets back to his best, Miles Robinson. So it's reasonable to think that they could finish 2nd.
I think it's reasonable. And I honestly, I'm going to put this out here again as an outsider, but I think it's realistic to say with some of the talent on this team front to back, right? Miles Robinson is a leading center back. Evander is a leading center mid. His numbers were in Messi category all year. Like that dude is a dude. And Kevin Denke, is one of the, maybe better center forwards in the league. I think it's realistic for Cincy fans to feel like in this era with a head coach who seems to understand the team, has good recruitment and has a good roster to pull from, that this team should accomplish something. Like I know that it's hard for you to come out and say like, and you're absolutely right about Miami, that we did preview them and they said, yeah, honestly, we should win 4 trophies this year. But like in this era, maybe not this season, but in this era, I think there's a realistic expectation that this team is going to lift something.
Yeah, there's no reason why they shouldn't. You just outlined the spine of the team, right? You had Obi Wobodo in there who has like Diego Chara levels of, ground covering and playing the 6, and you have such a solid spine. There's no reason why they couldn't win something other than it seems in Miami just seems inevitable at this point in so many ways. But in knockout tournaments, anything could happen. Somebody gets a red card or somebody's injured or somebody has the flu and all of a sudden somebody's knocked out and you don't have to face Miami at all, or you knock Miami out. So I will be disappointed if they do not lift a trophy in the next, I would say 3 seasons, because I think that would allow for Messi to transition out of the picture. But it's not out of the question for them to lift one this year.
Not at all.
Absolutely. It's going quickly. The comment, Foxy, it's an old friend from the Bet US show. He's kind of followed us over here. Brian Ramirez, what a signing. Thought he would have gone to Europe, to be honest. He was so impressive in Libertadores for LDU. He provides a lot more goals for Denke. I'm sure you love to hear that.
Yeah, it's thrilling because the wingback was a black hole last year when DeAndre Yedlin and because Luca Orishano was like a no-show, Lucas Engel was out there. You basically had 2 guys that were better as outside center backs playing wingback and trying to play offense. And neither of those were offensive threats. So having a real offensive threat out on the left could be huge.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about, look forward, this team. When they match up, who are they going to match up well against? Tell us about tactical strengths and of Cincy.
Yeah, I think you talked about the defense and you talk about a guy like Miles Robinson. Matt Miazga is not the quickest anymore, but he reads the game really well. I think teams that want to possess the ball and probe for openings, like a Miami, that really want to exert their force with the ball, FC Cincinnati matches up pretty well against. And, obviously it didn't show in the final game against Miami, which was the one that matters, but it showed in the previous two. So maybe not Miami in particular, but teams like that really want to score with possession. Those are the teams that I feel like FC Cincinnati match up great against.
I actually totally agree. And I'm just going to bring this up because I saw Cincinnati play live last year. They came to my town, and the intensity that they stepped to the ball and the way that they closed off passing lanes and things like that on the road was so impressive. And I attended a lot of games last season, and the physicality and intensity of the way that they move around the pitch was very, very different to other teams. And so as you talk about, actually they kind of do favor playing against these teams that want to possess against them. I think that's real.
Yeah.
I think the way that they play defense and the intensity that they push on you, I think creates those mistakes. And those are the kind of things that Evander wants, because the defense is out of position and Denke is in and he's isolated or something like that.
What about the inverse? What teams are going to match up well against Cincinnati this year?
Yeah, I think that teams that want to play in transition, teams that high press, and then, when they defend in transition, it's lots of just like chopping at you from behind sort of things. I think those are the teams FC Cincinnati struggles the most against, because FC Cincinnati struggles to really get out and score in true transition, and they really struggle to defend in space in quick transition. So it's like those two are the worst of both worlds. So go look at the Philadelphia game from last year, and you'll see like that team was a team FC Cincinnati didn't just struggle against, but like looked like bereft of ideas against, just the high pressure and the relentless harrying you all over the pitch.
I missed a question on the previous graphics, so we're going to go back. What are some storylines to follow throughout the season? Most people watching this video are not going to be FC Cincinnati fans, but will at some point turn on a game, whether it be, the matinee or one of the Sunday matches. What should we be looking for throughout the season?
I mean, I think the biggest story for how MLS shakes out can Kevin Danke and Evander actually play together and connect, because they're two special players. If they start to connect, you're going to see a lot of really beautiful goals from those two playing in and off of each other. From there, I think the other thing to look for is like some of these younger players that are kind of first time in MLS, or, just barely got their toe in the water in MLS last season. The Jabari, the Ender Echenike, the Sammy Gidi, these guys that are coming to play in Major League Soccer. If they can take the step, they can all be excellent players in this league, which could really make FC Cincinnati a fun team to watch.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to be watching those wing backs. Every time I turn on a Cincy game, I'm going to be looking to see how efficient they are, how effective they are, and if Cincy's able to use them to build up and get those balls into the box. But looking at a specific player, who improves the most in 2026 over their 2025 form?
Oh, that's a great question. I would think that the candidate to take the biggest step forward might be Sammy Gidi. I just think it's hard because he was only there for half the season, but he looked so good for a young player. I just really think that he's going to end up a starter. There's not any really great candidates for players because there's so many already established stars that were on the team. That's why they should have done better. Is Miles Robinson going to get better? Is Kevin Danke going to get better? I mean, maybe that could happen. He could score 20 goals or 25, but that's, jumping from really good to great.
I would accept at the end of the season, if we were to talk about this again, I would accept like a Kevin Danke shout, even if he had less goals, but if his goals were more impactful, right? If he was scoring more goals to win games or when games were tied or something like that, I would accept that. But let's look at the opposite. Which of the players do you think regresses or takes a step backwards in 2026?
Well, you all are professionals, and you teased this for me because you said Nick Hagglund was so good last year, and then yet he's not a projected starter. For me, the guy that you have to look at as a candidate for regression is Nick Hagglund, and I love him. He's a Cincinnati kid. He is such an intense player, and he's such an important part of the team, but he's on the wrong side of 30. He is 33. He'll turn 34 this season, I think. He's had major injuries in each of the last two seasons, and I just can't imagine that he won't start to lose a half a step, and he's not the fastest player to begin with. And for a player whose MO is built on being aggressive and attacking the ball and all these things, because he's not the best at anything. He's just really intense. He just plays really hard. For a guy that is, his bread and butter, you lose half a step, and all of a sudden you're half a step late into a tackle, and you're getting carded more, and you're missing out on these headers because you don't have position, and things can go downhill quick.
Awesome. That's kind of all we got for the episode. Scott, do you have any final thoughts? Anyone else in the chat? If you drop any comments, we can pull them up in this segment. Scott?
I don't know if we pulled up this last comment by Foxy. I think Cincy can be the next contenders behind Miami. I'm kind of there. There are different elements. I kind of think like the LAFC team with Son and Bouanga, I think their dynamic is a little more established. I expect them to actually be like almost Miami-esque in the sense of like their ambition. But Cincy's roster is so strong and complete to me that I expect Cincy to be one of the teams that you look at in 2026 as like, if anybody's going to do it, Cincy should be one of the teams that it can do it.
Yeah, you can easily make a case that if Miazga is back even close to Defender of the Year, so not Defender of the Year, but close to that, where he was 2 years ago, you can make a case, and Hagelin doesn't regress. Already there, you just can't find any holes on the roster. You could also make the opposite case if Miazga is like terrible and slow because he's been hurt, and he's still not back on the pitch in preseason, by the way, and if Kevin Denke and Evander don't learn to play nice together and they can't pass, and Brian Ramirez was great in Ecuador but doesn't know how to do things in America, this team could also be I don't think they'll miss the playoffs, but they could finish, 7th, 6th, maybe only have one home playoff game in the first round and be done after that.
Ooh, I think that would be a huge disappointment.
For sure.
I would like to see that.
You just want to see me crash and burn
from that Red Bull game, playoff game where they were yelling at the fans in the stands. Not a great look, but I've demonized myself enough in the eyes of the FC Cincinnati faithful. Let us know, Coach, where we can find your work one more time.
Yeah, check us out on CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com, especially if you're not a Cincinnati fan, but when your team is getting ready to play or has just played FC Cincinnati, we have great game previews and recaps. Tune in that Monday after the game too to hear us talk about the show. We are all Cincinnati. It's a fan-run show, but we talk about both teams, and I think it's an interesting perspective. So CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com or Cincy Soccer Talk on the socials.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us here tonight. Thank you for everyone for watching. Make sure you tune in for all 30 Major League Soccer team previews. Have a great night.